Lyra and Mivra stared in disbelief as their small spacecraft plunged through the thick atmosphere of Earth. This was not where they had imagined their punishment would take them. In fact, Earth seemed nothing like what they had been told. The strange planet was nothing more than a speck of blue and green in the vastness of space, yet it felt like an endless, unknown world. They were supposed to be punished, sent far away to somewhere they wouldn't fit in or be understood. Yet they had no idea that Earth would turn out to be anything other than a place to exile them. In truth, both girls didn't care where they landed. Xantharian, their home, was a place filled with strict rules, a place where they couldn't think outside the boundaries of what was expected. As such, they were exiled to a planet that would push them to the very edge of their existence. For breaking the highest law of their world, advocating for a less divided society, they had been forced into exile. The ruling class thought it would be a fate worse than death. The craft jerked suddenly, pulling them from their thoughts. Lyra quickly grabbed the control board, while Mivra looked out the small viewing window at the strange world they had been condemned to. "It's beautiful," Mivra whispered softly. Lyra glanced over, eyes narrowing. Mivra was always so soft-hearted, always willing to find the good in things. But Lyra had no time for it. She only felt anger. Anger at the society that had forced them out, and anger at Earth itself for being a place filled with uncertainty. The spaceship tilted and made a loud groaning sound. The girls quickly readjusted the settings, hoping the crash landing wouldn't be disastrous. The dense, blue sky outside their window told them they were nearing the surface, and soon everything became a blur. They hit the ground with a heavy thud. The impact rattled through their bodies, causing them to brace themselves. For several moments, everything seemed quiet. Too quiet. When Lyra opened her eyes, she could only see the wreckage around them. The small shuttle was no longer intact. It was a heap of damaged metal and wires. "Are you okay?" Mivra asked softly, her voice filled with concern. Lyra took a deep breath, wiping the dust from her brow. "I think I'm fine. I think we should check outside," Mivra suggested, her eyes scanning the wreckage. Reluctantly, Lyra stood and climbed out of the damaged shuttle. As she stepped outside, her foot hit the soft, green ground, and she felt something strange. The ground beneath her feet was far different from the solid, industrial floors of their homeworld. Earth was not like Xantharian at all. Looking around, the alien environment stretched out in every direction. They had landed somewhere on Earth that seemed peaceful. Trees surrounded them, some tall and towering, while others stood crooked but still strong. The air felt different, like it was alive. The wind danced with the leaves, whispering something in a language they couldn't understand. It smelled pleasant, unlike anything they had ever known. Mivra stepped forward, breathing in the fresh air. "I think it's beautiful." Lyra stared blankly at the landscape. She was still caught up in her anger. "This isn't where I belong." She clenched her fist tightly. "We were sentenced to suffer here, and here is where we will stay." She spoke more to herself than to Mivra. Her heart raced in frustration. "We should try to fix the ship," Mivra said. Lyra shook her head, feeling the weight of the reality set in. "I don't think we can fix anything with these primitive resources." Mivra paused. "Maybe we can learn about their ways. Maybe we can survive here longer than they thought." Before Lyra could respond, they heard something approaching. A man was coming toward them from a distance, moving quickly. His skin was different from theirs, darker but smooth. He wasn't like the beings they had met before, his eyes curious as he approached. He looked at their wrecked spaceship, but then focused on the two of them. The man walked closer, his steps quick, yet careful. "What happened? Are you all right?" he asked, the concern clear in his voice. Lyra's first instinct was to back away, to run. Who was this strange human? What did he want? Was this yet another way they would be punished? She moved her hand close to the sharp edges of the wreckage, just in case, though she didn't know what she would do. But Mivra stepped forward, ever the more trusting of the two. "We're fine. We've crashed," Mavra replied. She smiled faintly, noticing the way his eyes softened upon hearing her words. She could already tell he wasn't dangerous. This strange human seemed different from the emotionless commanders who had sent them here. He was warm. Lara hesitated, looking around for any sign of danger. "We should be left alone," she muttered, her voice low. But the man continued to approach. His eyes seemed to take in everything at once. He squatted next to their wreckage, his hand gently touching the surface of the ship. His face was full of questions. "What's your name? Where are you from?" he asked, his voice calm and soothing. Liara didn't answer. She didn't know if she should trust him. They were not supposed to trust humans. They were too different. And yet, "We came from a faraway place," Mavra said cautiously, smiling but unsure. The man stared at them, still trying to understand. Something in his expression made Lyra feel uneasy, but there was also something else, curiosity. And despite herself, Lyra realized that maybe Earth wasn't exactly what she had thought it would be. Daniel stared at the two girls, unsure of what to make of them. The way they looked at him, their alien faces both curious and cautious, sent a chill down his spine. He had never seen anyone quite like them. Their clothing was strange, and their skin shimmered with an almost unnatural glow, unlike anything Earth's people had. Still, Daniel was a man who had grown up believing in helping others, no matter how strange they appeared. You're not hurt, are you?" he asked again, feeling the need to help them. After all, they had crash-landed near his property. Liara didn't say anything at first. She simply crossed her arms, eyes narrowing as if trying to assess the human in front of her. Mivra, on the other hand, seemed more open. She took a cautious step forward. "We're fine," Mivra replied softly, her voice strangely calming despite the situation. "The crash. It was difficult, but we're unharmed." Daniel took a step closer, cautiously. "Where did you come from?" "I saw the ship. It's like nothing I've seen before." Are you from another country?" Liara shook her head, her lips pressing into a thin line. She didn't trust this human at all. Not yet, anyway. But Mivra seemed different. She stepped forward and spoke again, her tone still hesitant, but also full of wonder. "We didn't come from a country," she said. "We came from a place far beyond your stars, a planet called Zintharian." Daniel blinked, feeling a mix of disbelief and fascination. Zintharian. He had never heard of it. Zintharian, he repeated slowly. That sounds like a science fiction story. Mivra smiled slightly at his confused expression, then turned to Lyra for reassurance. Lyra remained still, unwilling to share much more. She had always been the more reserved one, the one who believed that their mission, if it could be called that, was only about surviving on this alien world until they were called back. "Well, welcome to Earth, I guess," Daniel continued awkwardly. Are you okay? I can help you with the ship if you need it." His eyes drifted over to their crashed spacecraft, a sad heap of twisted metal and broken systems. Mivra hesitated, glancing at the ship, then at Lyra. Lyra's posture was stiff, her arms still crossed. The quiet between them all was palpable. After a few seconds, she spoke up. "We don't need your help," she said, though her tone was less harsh than before. "But thank you." Daniel stood in silence for a moment, processing her words. He didn't want to leave them stranded, not in this unknown situation. These girls clearly weren't from around here. Maybe they were stranded, confused, just like he'd be if he found himself far from his own world. "Well, you're welcome, but..." He paused, scratching the back of his neck awkwardly. "I have a few supplies back at my house if you want to rest for a bit." Liara shot him a sharp glance but said nothing. However, Mivra seemed to be deep in thought, as though weighing Daniel's offer against the unknowns of their situation. For a moment, there was a flicker of uncertainty in Lyra's eyes too. She quickly looked away, not wanting to admit to herself that maybe it would be better to stay. Maybe, Mivra murmured, just to rest. We're tired. Without another word, Mivra stepped back, moving slowly toward Daniel's house, a gentle smile forming on her lips as she glanced back to check that Liara would follow. Liara, though reluctant, was compelled to follow. It wasn't that she trusted this human, Daniel. It was more that the uncertainty of being alone with nothing familiar made her uncomfortable. She didn't know what to do or where to go. Earth felt strange, like a dream she couldn't escape, and for reasons she didn't fully understand, Daniel's presence gave her a strange sense of stability, though she resisted admitting it. So, Daniel began as they walked toward his house, trying to ease the silence with something light. Syntherian, does your planet have anything like pizza? You know, the cheesy dough thing. Mivra smiled a little. We don't have that, she answered politely. But we've heard about food from Earth. We're interested in trying it, though. I think it's complicated. You'll be okay, Daniel said with a grin. Earth food's actually pretty great. But we'll stick with something easy for now. Maybe just sandwiches. As they continued walking, Daniel tried to learn more about where they came from. The more he listened to Mivra talk about Syntherian, their homeworld, the more his curiosity grew. Her descriptions painted a picture of a sophisticated, almost perfect society. But even she admitted that it came with harsh rules, rules that led to their punishment and exile. There are many things we have not understood about Earth, Mivra explained. You're very different from what we know. Yeah, we're not perfect, Daniel admitted with a chuckle. We had a lot of problems here too. Liara stayed silent as they reached Daniel's home, still unsure. But her mind raced as she glanced at the human's strange way of living. Could they trust him? Could they trust a whole planet of people who seemed so different from what they had known? They didn't know yet. As Mivra reached the door first, Liara hesitated. For a moment, she felt a strange sensation, a subtle tug in the back of her mind, as if this unfamiliar world might hold far more than just survival. She didn't understand it, but something told her that Earth held answers she hadn't yet discovered. Inside, Daniel smiled, showing them the warmth of a life the alien girls hadn't known before, a warmth that felt so unfamiliar, yet oddly comforting. As they entered Daniel's home, Liara couldn't help but feel a sense of wonder mixed with caution. The interior was so different from anything she had ever seen. The walls were covered with various shapes, colors, and lights, all of which seemed more vibrant than the cold, uniform structure of their homeland, Syntherian. This is your home? Liara asked, her voice a little softer than before. She was still on edge, but now had a curious respect for the way humans lived. Despite the alien nature of it all, there was something oddly comforting about the warm, dim lighting and the faint sounds of a simple life. Daniel nodded, taking a few steps forward to the kitchen. Yeah, it's not much, but it's home. Welcome. I'll make some food for you guys. Just stay as long as you like. We have some time to figure things out. Mivra smiled, appreciating Daniel's openness. Thank you for your kindness, she said, her voice soft but genuine. She stood by the door, looking around with wide eyes, taking in every detail of the small space. Liara, however, remained silent, standing stiffly by the wall. She was still processing everything, still unsure about trusting this stranger. She couldn't explain it, but there was something about Earth that unsettled her, something hidden beneath its peaceful appearance. It felt too different, and people here. They didn't act like the cold commanders she was used to. Daniel returned with a tray full of simple sandwiches, his warm smile evident despite the awkward tension in the room. Eat. You must be hungry, he said, placing the food on the table. His gaze settled on Liara. I wasn't sure what you'd like, but I kept it simple. It's mostly bread, some vegetables, and meat. Nothing too strange. Mivra sat at the table and gingerly took one of the sandwiches, taking the small bite. This is surprisingly good, she said. Her face brightened as she chewed. "We don't have this kind of food on Syntherian. Everything there is highly processed and uniform." She looked up at Daniel, fascinated by the food's taste and texture. Liara, however, only stared at her sandwich. Her appetite was nowhere to be found. Her thoughts raced. She couldn't let her guard down. But something in the simple way Mivra was enjoying the meal made Liara pause. She watched her fellow exile smile, savoring something as simple as bread and vegetables, something Liara hadn't realized she had missed so much in their tightly controlled existence. As Mivra ate, Daniel watched Liara carefully, wondering if there was anything he could do to make her feel more at ease. He had noticed that she had been quiet since their arrival. There was a distinct tension in her every movement, something guarded, even defensive. Liara finally looked up and spoke. "We were sent here for punishment." Daniel froze, unsure of how to respond. He had sensed that there was more to their story, that they weren't just lost travelers. The way they talked, the way they moved, it felt like they were carrying some heavy burden. Punishment. For what? Daniel asked cautiously. Liara's jaw tightened, but she didn't back down. "We were punished because we questioned the rules of our society. We wanted change. But change isn't allowed where we come from." Mavra nodded slowly in agreement. "Syntherian has very strict rules. Everything has its place, its order. Questioning anything is seen as a crime." Her words were gentle but carried the weight of deep pain. She had been one of the few who dared challenge those in power. Now her actions had led her and Liara to this foreign planet. Daniel's face softened with understanding. He wasn't an expert on alien cultures, but he could imagine what it was like to live under such strict control. Everyone had their limits, and sometimes pushing for change felt necessary, especially when the world seemed to lack heart. "I can't imagine what that must be like," Daniel said quietly. "Here on Earth, things can be chaotic, but we have freedom. Maybe too much of it. Sometimes." He chuckled lightly, trying to ease the mood. "But we get to think for ourselves here." Mavra smiled, her voice warm. "That sounds nice. We've always had the rules to follow. But here, it's like nothing's set in stone." Liara remained still, her expression unreadable. "And here, you give us food, shelter, all without asking anything in return." Daniel felt a pang of guilt, realizing just how much he was offering without fully understanding what they were going through. He wanted to help, but he wasn't sure why he felt so drawn to them. These two girls from another world. They were far from ordinary travelers, and yet there was a light in their eyes, something beyond their exile and punishment. "Not because of anything in return," Daniel said, almost shyly. "I believe in kindness. People sometimes forget that, especially when life gets tough." Liara hesitated, weighing his words. She didn't fully trust him yet, but something in Daniel's sincerity struck a chord inside her. Maybe there was some truth to what he said. Maybe they had underestimated Earth. Maybe it was more than just a place for their punishment. She glanced over at Mivra, who looked much more comfortable with the situation, her eyes gleaming with curiosity. Liara thought about how much Mivra had already accepted, how much she was willing to embrace this strange world. Was it so wrong to consider the possibility of building something better here? Was she truly prepared to let Earth be more than just a prison to them? The sound of crickets chirped through the window, filling the room with an unfamiliar but soothing melody. It was peaceful. The moment was peaceful. And yet, Liara couldn't shake the feeling that peace, true peace, was something she wasn't sure she deserved. Still, as she sat across from Mivra and Daniel, she allowed herself to imagine what it might feel like to be free from all the rules, free from a society that demanded so much. Maybe it wasn't such a terrible thing after all. Maybe Earth could give her something she hadn't expected. Freedom. As the days passed, Daniel, Liara, and Mivra settled into a strange kind of routine. It was nothing like the strict life they had known back on Syntherian. Yet for the first time in a long time, the girls started to feel a hint of comfort. Earth was nothing like home. No cold, emotionless systems, no rigid rules. Here, there was space for them to breathe. There was something calming about it, something that made them question what they had known before. Mivra had become fond of Earth's simplicity, taking long walks in the garden outside Daniel's house, marveling at the beauty of the trees and flowers. She had never been so close to nature, and the vibrant colors of the earth plants left her in awe. She spoke often to Daniel about their home planet, trying to explain their world, its rigid rules, its technology. But every time she did, there was always a spark of yearning in her eyes, as though Earth was slowly becoming a place she didn't want to leave. But it was Lara who struggled to adjust. Every night, she lay awake staring at the dark ceiling, unable to escape her thoughts. While Mivra embraced everything Earth had to offer, Lara kept her distance. She couldn't forget why they were here. They hadn't come to Earth out of curiosity or choice. They had been sent here to be punished. The mission was clear in her mind: survive, endure, and ultimately return to Zintharian. There was no room for softness. Yet, every day with Daniel chipped away at her walls. She found herself observing him, fascinated by the simplicity with which he lived his life. He was kind, but there was a deeper strength to him, a strength that went beyond his actions. There was no complexity in his eyes, no hidden agenda, no ulterior motives. He acted out of the goodness of his heart, and it was something Lara had never known before. One afternoon, while Mivra was out exploring, Daniel decided it was time to have an honest conversation with Lara. "I know you're struggling," Daniel said, breaking the silence as he entered the small living room where Lara sat by the window. She had been watching the sunset, her face tense, as usual. Lara turned toward him, her face unreadable. She had grown used to his quiet presence, but rarely allowed herself to trust his words completely. "You don't understand." Daniel took a seat on the edge of the couch. "Maybe I don't, but I can see it in your eyes. You're holding back. You're waiting for something to change." Liara was silent for a long moment. She didn't know how to explain the constant conflict in her heart. To trust or not to trust. To remain distant or to let herself be part of something she never thought she would allow. "We were sent here because we defied the rules," she said slowly, choosing her words carefully. "Back on Zintharian, we were told to obey, to stay in line. We wanted change, but that wasn't allowed." Daniel nodded as if he understood, although he couldn't know what it felt like to live in such a controlled world. "What does change mean to you?" Lara looked away, her voice heavy with memories. "It means freedom. It means living without fear, without someone always watching over you, deciding what you can or cannot do. On Zintharian, we were nothing more than tools. If you stepped out of line, you were punished. I couldn't live like that anymore." Daniel thought for a moment before speaking. "But you're not in Zintharian anymore. You're free now. And nobody here is going to tell you how to live." His voice was gentle, yet it carried a firmness that seemed to give her pause. "I don't know how Zintharian works, but on Earth, people have the chance to choose, to make their own way." A strange tension passed between them. Lara had always been taught that choices were dangerous, but as she looked into Daniel's eyes, she began to see that there could be more to life than rigid control. "I've watched you," Daniel continued. "I can see how hard you're trying to hold on to your old life, your old rules, but you don't need them here." Lara's lips parted, but no words came out. The idea of living freely, without fear or punishment, was foreign to her, yet Daniel's words stirred something deep inside her. Perhaps there was a way to make a new start here. But could she truly let go of everything she had known? Could she accept that there might be another way of living? The thought terrified her. And yet, what if the rules, the order, are all we know? What if that's the only way to live? Lara questioned, almost to herself. Daniel shook his head. "It's a choice, Lara. The truth is, we can keep living like we're stuck, or we can create our own future." He stood, leaving her to consider his words alone. He hadn't expected a sudden answer. Change didn't come easy, especially to someone who had spent a lifetime in a place ruled by fear and regulations. But Lara was slowly beginning to consider the possibility of a new way of thinking, of living. Mivra returned just then, her laughter like a ray of sunshine through the door, carrying with it stories of the strange creatures she'd found outside. For a brief moment, Lara watched Mivra, seeing her freely moving between the worlds of past and present. And Lara couldn't help but feel a twinge of envy. The freedom that Mivra was embracing was a kind of luxury that had seemed out of reach for Lara for so long. Later that evening, Daniel made a suggestion. "Tomorrow, I want to take you both on a trip, a chance to see more of Earth. If you really want to experience life here, there's no better way." Lara thought about it. She couldn't deny the growing curiosity in her mind. Maybe this small trip, away from everything they knew, would give her the space she needed to truly consider her next step. With a deep breath, Lara finally spoke. "All right, show us Earth, Daniel." And for the first time, Lara allowed herself to believe in the possibility of change, of embracing something more than what she had always known. She just had to take the first step. The morning was crisp with the scent of fresh air, and the sun had just begun to rise over the horizon, casting a soft glow over everything. Lara had never witnessed a sunrise quite like this before. Back on Syntherian, days were predictable, controlled. Sunsets and sunrises didn't feel special. But here, on Earth, it was as if nature itself was reminding her that everything was different now. Everything could be different. Daniel had made breakfast for them, a simple meal of eggs and toast. The smell filled the house, and for a moment, it felt like any other ordinary morning. But Lara knew today was different. Daniel had invited them to explore a part of Earth they had never seen before, the forests, the vast expanses of nature that still felt untouched by human hands. Mivra seemed particularly excited about it. "Come on, Lara, let's go see the world." Mivra called out cheerfully as she finished getting ready, her excitement contagious. Lara looked at Daniel, who stood near the door with a calm smile. There was no rush, no expectation. It felt almost like an invitation to freedom, an invitation to explore life in ways she never could have imagined back home. They drove for hours, leaving the city behind as they ventured into the deep green woods that lay beyond. Lara watched the landscapes unfold in front of her, huge trees, wild animals, and rushing rivers. The earth was full of life, far more than she had ever seen. Even Mivra, who had seen a lot in the few days she had been on Earth, seemed overwhelmed by the beauty around them. "I've never seen so much life in one place," Mivra exclaimed, running her fingers through the soft grass beside a flowing stream. Lara could barely respond. She felt as though everything was so wild and untamed, a stark contrast to Syntherian's rigid systems. She had been taught to avoid getting attached, to never let anything influence her thinking. But here, surrounded by beauty, it was difficult to resist the pull of something deeper within her. At their first stop, they sat down by a clear lake. It sparkled like a gem, and the air around it felt so clean. Daniel broke the silence. "So, what do you think?" he asked, sitting beside them. His eyes were soft but full of curiosity, as if this adventure was just as much for him as it was for them. Mivra grinned widely. "It's amazing. I feel like I'm in a dream." She kicked her feet playfully into the water, the sound of splashes filling the air. Lara, however, stayed quiet. She gazed out across the lake, her mind still racing. She could feel the weight of her old life back on Syntherian, pressing against her chest. She remembered how the planet's cold, detached rules had governed everything. No personal choice, no feeling beyond duty. This place, Earth, was nothing like that. It was messy, imperfect, and yet alive. But could she let go of all she had known? Could she trust in something as fragile as Earth's way of life? As they sat in silence, Daniel noticed her hesitation. "I know this might be hard for you, Lara," he said quietly, But you don't have to figure everything out at once. There's no rush. His words were gentle but firm, like a reminder that she could choose what path to take. It was a simple choice, yet it felt monumental. Choose trust, choose change. They spent the rest of the day exploring, with Mivra leading the way. There were moments when Lyra felt her walls start to crumble, a kind of peace she had never known in Syntherian, a sense of being present rather than always looking ahead. She allowed herself to enjoy the beauty of the world, even if only for a few fleeting moments. As night fell and they set up camp in a small clearing, they built a fire. Lyra watched the flames flicker and dance in the cool night air. The stars above were unlike anything she had ever seen on her home planet. There were so many of them, bright, shining in endless patterns. Mivra, ever the enthusiast, turned to Lyra and spoke. "I can't wait to see more. Earth has so much to offer." Lyra finally gave a small, tired smile. It wasn't much, but it was a start. She could see that the Earth was different from Syntherian in ways she could hardly comprehend. Later, as the fire died down and the cool night breeze blew gently around them, Lyra sat next to Daniel by the embers. Mivra had already fallen asleep under the stars, her deep breathing almost in rhythm with the wind. Daniel broke the silence, his voice soft and reflective. "I think the most important part of this journey is about learning to let go of things that don't serve you, whether it's pain, fear, or old ways of thinking. Only when you let go can you truly grow." Lyra nodded, her gaze fixed on the glowing embers. His words stayed with her. Could she truly leave everything behind? Let go of the past that had shaped her? There were no answers yet, only possibilities. "I know I don't have the answers," Lyra spoke quietly after a long pause. "But maybe I can begin to see what you mean. Maybe I don't have to go back to what I was before." Daniel turned to her with a warm smile. "You don't have to. This is your new start. The future, it is what you make of it." Lyra remained silent, letting the fire's warmth seep into her bones. Maybe this was the beginning of something she never expected, something bigger than the life she had known. As they lay under the vast, open sky, Lyra allowed herself to imagine what freedom could look like. And for the first time, she felt like the world might hold something more than just rules to follow. There was space for hope, for new dreams to be born, even if it meant taking the smallest of steps. The days seemed to fly by for Lyra and Mivra, as each day on Earth unfolded like a new adventure. After the peaceful trip to the lake, they had continued to explore the wide landscapes of Earth, its deep forests, rolling hills, and sparkling oceans. For the first time, Lyra truly felt free, though there was a small part of her that hesitated to fully embrace it. It wasn't the life she had known, but it was hers now. She had a chance to decide for herself what she wanted. Their latest journey led them to a small village far away from the busy city. The village, with its cozy homes, friendly faces, and quiet streets, felt completely different from the towering buildings they had first encountered in Earth's larger cities. People waved as they walked by, smiling at the two visitors from distant worlds. It wasn't the bustling, fast-paced environment they had first experienced, but instead something simpler. Here, time seemed to move slower, and life felt grounded in the warmth of community. Lyra found herself thinking again about her old life, about Syntherian, about the rules, and the endless obligations she had faced there. Life had always been set, structured, and predictable. No room for mistakes, no room for choice. Here on Earth, everything was unplanned, and it made Lyra realize how much of herself had been stifled back home. In the center of the village, there was a lively square with a market where fresh vegetables and fruits filled the air with sweet scents. Mivra was already running to the stall, her eyes wide in excitement at the colorful food laid before her. Lyra watched her friend with a quiet smile. Mivra, who had once been so withdrawn, was now starting to let herself truly live. "Lyra," Mivra called out as she picked up a small basket of bright, shiny apples. "These look delicious. You have to try them." Lyra's heart warmed at the sight of Mivra's enthusiasm. She hadn't realized how much her friend had changed, how much both of them had changed since their arrival. And it wasn't just Earth's beauty that had brought this out. It was the sense of kindness in the people, the shared laughter, the feeling that they were a part of something bigger. Later that afternoon, they sat in the village square enjoying the fresh fruit Mivra had insisted on buying. A feeling of peace settled over them as they watched the villagers go about their daily routines. It was a far cry from their pasts. Lyra's life had been defined by harsh rules, and Mivra had known only the loneliness of her punishment. But here, there were no rules but the ones they decided to follow. As the evening sky grew dim, Lyra and Mivra walked along the cobblestone paths toward a peaceful river that wound through the village. The calm waters mirrored the darkening sky above, and the air was cool and crisp. Everything seemed perfect. An invitation for a fresh start. A new world. "So, do you think we could ever really belong here?" Lyra asked quietly, breaking the comfortable silence between them. Her eyes watched the reflection of the stars in the water. Mivra stopped walking, pausing to think about the question. She had always been quick to act, quick to embrace what the earth gave her. But Lyra's question felt more difficult. Could they, two beings from another planet, truly belong here? "I think so," Mivra said with a thoughtful smile. "But it won't be easy. We'll have to keep learning. Earth is a different place than home. But that's what makes it exciting, don't you think?" Lyra nodded slowly. Mivra was right. It wasn't about what was easy. It was about what could be. The more Lyra thought about it, the more she realized that the excitement wasn't just about the places they visited or the things they saw. It was about the feeling of discovery. Earth felt like a land of possibility, a place where life was filled with choices, changes, and the hope of something better. It was chaotic, sure, but in its chaos was a beauty that she had never known back home. After some time, they reached the riverbank. They sat together on the soft grass, watching the stars. Daniel, who had stayed back in the village to speak with some locals, had made it clear that there were no time limits, no rules on this journey. They were free to live and explore as they chose. It was, in many ways, a dream come true. Lyra looked up at the sky and felt the weight on her heart lessen. Maybe Earth wasn't perfect, but it wasn't about perfection. It was about living. And for the first time in a long while, Lyra thought about what she could give to this world, not just what she could take, like she had done on Syntherian, but what she could truly add. She had learned enough to know that being a part of something didn't mean obeying every rule. It meant giving and taking with love and trust. Mivra leaned back on the grass, closing her eyes. "I don't think I'll ever be able to go back," she said softly, almost to herself. "This world, it makes me feel like I belong somewhere." Lyra's heart skipped a beat at the thought. Maybe it was true for both of them. Earth wasn't just where they had been sent for punishment. It was where they were finding the freedom to live and change. Lyra looked toward the sky again, eyes open to the infinite possibilities. There were no limits here, not unless they chose them. There was nothing but the endless promise of discovery ahead. This world, for all its differences, felt like home. The stars were bright in the night sky, each one shining like a tiny hope against the dark canvas above. Lyra and Mivra sat at the edge of the river, the soft breeze brushing against their faces. The world around them was calm, almost peaceful, but deep inside, they felt something changing, something beautiful. The journey they had begun on Earth wasn't just about exploring a new world. It was about finding themselves in ways they never expected. They had already been here for several months now. Earth was no longer just a strange planet full of new sights and sounds. It had become home. And through every step, Lyra had seen a new side of herself she had never imagined. Someone who could laugh, dream, and feel free. Mivra had grown too. The quiet, shy girl from the day they'd first landed had blossomed into someone full of laughter and energy. She was no longer burdened by the silence of the past. Every day felt like a new chance to live. Together, they had made new friends in the village. people who saw them as more than just visitors. There was an old woman named Clara who always sat by the river, telling stories of Earth's past with a twinkle in her eye. "You too," Clara often said, "are not so different from us. You're just like seeds, growing into something beautiful, no matter where you're from." Liara smiled at Clara's words now. She often thought of how true they were. In the beginning, they had come to Earth as strangers, with no real place to call home. But now, they had discovered the bonds of friendship, of care, and of love for this strange, wonderful world. They had found a place where they belonged, a home that welcomed them as they were, with all their differences. But their journey wasn't over. They still had a long way to go, and there were more things to discover about Earth and about themselves. Liara had always wanted to learn, but now she realized that learning wasn't just about knowledge. It was about understanding life in all its complexities and embracing everything it offered. On this quiet evening, Liara and Mivra were not the same people who had landed on Earth those many months ago. They had grown. They had learned how to live freely, how to love, and how to let go of their past. "Do you think we'll ever want to leave?" Liara asked Mivra, breaking the peaceful silence. Mivra thought for a moment, her eyes fixed on the shimmering water. "I don't know," she said quietly. "I think I've found a place here. It's hard to imagine anywhere else could feel like this." Liara looked down at the grass beneath them, touching the cool earth with her fingers. The ground beneath her felt strong and steady, just like the friendships and experiences she had made. It was a reminder of everything they had built here, a reminder that they had found their new purpose in the most unexpected way. A soft, distant hum broke the quiet. It was Daniel, walking slowly toward them along the path. He smiled when he saw them sitting by the river, the two alien girls who had come so far from their old lives. "You know, I never thought this would be how things turned out," Daniel said, his voice full of warmth. He had become a good friend to both Liara and Mivra. He had taught them so many things about Earth, and in return, they had shared stories of their home planets, creating a bond unlike anything he had expected. "I think it turned out better than any of us could have guessed," Liara replied, looking at Mivra with a smile. "I think Earth was exactly what we needed." Mivra nodded. "It's like I found something here, something more than I had on my home planet." As they continued to sit in the soft grass, a silence fell over the group, one of contentment and reflection. They could hear the gentle sounds of nature around them, the soft hum of insects, and the rustling of leaves in the wind. For the first time, they all felt truly at peace. The strange planet that once seemed so far from their reach, so strange, had now become a place they all cherish. In that peaceful moment, Liara's mind went back to Zinthurian, to the cold rules and the distant life she had once lived. She had once believed it was her only choice, the only life she would ever know. But now, as she sat with her best friend and their new friend, she realized something important. She didn't have to be defined by her past anymore. The love she felt for Earth, and the love Earth had shown them, gave her a sense of hope she had never known. And with that hope, she saw a new future, a future where they were free, where no alien laws or old customs could hold them back. "Thank you, Earth," Liara whispered to the night sky. "You've given me something I never knew I could have." Mivra looked at her, her face soft with a smile. "We all have a place here now." And with that simple truth, they sat back, watching the stars, knowing that the adventure was just beginning. But this time, there was no place they would rather be than here, at home on Earth.